What's up, everybody? I'm TorridExplanations, your online hotspot where you find out what's hot and what's not, and I have not yet fully recovered from the awesomeness that was the 100th episode of My Little Pony Slice of Life. Woohoo! Oh my gosh, I so loved that episode. Derpy was awesome, the doctor was awesome. Oh, there is just so much material here to go on. All that said, Princess Spike, the follow-up episode, was very disappointing. But that's another video for another day, if I ever decide to do it. Now, why do I think this episode deserves an explanation? Well, apparently there are some people out there who really don't like this episode, mostly due to the fact that M.A. Larson is shooting pandas at us, and the story is an incoherent mess, quote-unquote. A friend of mine on DeviantArt, who for privacy protection reasons shall not be named, has gone on to say that this is easily the worst episode of the series. But I disagree. So on to the explanation as to why. First of all, this episode is first and foremost a thank you letter to the bronies from the show staff for making the series so freaking popular. Well, it doesn't hinder to every single little idea that the fandom has created surrounding these weirdly popular background characters. It does do enough and gives us plenty of material, canonizing our ideas into the into the mainstream universe. And frankly, I think that is just awesome. Thank you so much, M.A. Larson. Your gift to us has been readily accepted. And an extra big thanks for making my two favorite background ponies have the most interesting roles in the entire episode. Derpy's portrayal was perfect. Derpy is best pony! Okay, so obviously, to reiterate, this episode is a thank you note to the bronies. Though some have said it also should not be taken seriously, and have implied that it should not be considered canon into the mainstream universe. I disagree on that regard. Why? Well, it's kind of complicated, but explainable. Now, most people would view this, especially the ones who would criticize this episode, view this episode as any typical episode alongside the other episodes. But that is not I would argue that that is not actually an accurate perspective. Rather, it is an episode in the background. And that's what makes this episode so impressive. I honestly wish more TV shows would do this. As a matter of fact, I wish more TV show fandoms would do this. Just pick out interesting characters in the background, write full-on stories about them. Or at the very least, writers pick out characters from the background that they think are interesting and write a story about them. Granted, shows that have reached 100 episodes have done interesting things for the 100 episodes without focusing on the background characters, but well, yeah. Anyway, this episode is very unique in what it does. While it can't be considered part of the mainstream story canon, it still can be considered a canon episode. Why? As I've already said, it's an episode in the background. This is an episode that shows us what goes on in the background. Every time that the main six fight off a bugbear or some random monster, there's something interesting going on in the background. The episode is actually quite brilliant in its title because, while it may not at first depict typical slice-of-life things, it actually is a slice-of-life episode, as it depicts the typical life of the background ponies in this episode. Given how the ponies eventually start reacting to the bugbear attack, I can only assume this sort of background weirdness must go on in every episode. For every Discord ruining the Grand Galloping Gala with a smooze monster, there is a classical music mix going on at Octavia and Vinyl's house. For every lost treasure of Griffinstone being searched for, there is a Derpy and Doctor adventure. For every Spike mishap, there is some Lyra Bonbon shipping going on. And whatever else comes in the background of Pinky getting roared at by a lion thingy. this episode actually is slice of life. It's the day. It's a day in the life of the background ponies. So, in a sense, yes, the episode shouldn't really be taken seriously, but mostly because it's part of no overarching story. But it can still be considered canon because we can just assume that this is what goes on in the background. Once again, this is a really interesting look into the universe expansion of the episode. And I honestly do wish that more shows that succeed in reaching their 100 mark would do something like this. But then again, at the same time, I wish most fandoms would also do what the Bronies have done, and that is pick out interesting characters in the background and make whole elaborate stories surrounding them. But whatever, we got what we got here, and quite frankly, I really enjoyed it. My Little Pony episode 100 Slice of Life should not be viewed as a mainstream episode, but can still be viewed as a canon episode. It is an episode in the background, giving us a little bit of universe expansion and showing us that the lives of characters who are insignificant to the mainstream plot aren't any less interesting than that in the foreground. This episode, while the plot may seem incoherent, is still very much slice of life. This is Torrid Prime 217 signing out and reminding you to please Brony responsibly.